Welcome, everyone. Today we are exploring a truly fascinating topic in the diversity of chordates, plate tectonics. You might wonder why a zoology student needs to study the rocks beneath our feet. Well, as we will discover, the shifting of the Earth's surface is the ultimate stage director for the evolution of life. Let us dive in and see how the physical world shapes the biological one. To start, I want you to imagine you are looking at a giant, hard-boiled egg that has been dropped on the floor, causing the shell to crack into several large, jagged pieces. Now, imagine that just beneath that cracked shell is a layer of thick, boiling, moving soup that slowly pushes those shell pieces around. If you had tiny ants living on those shell pieces, they would slowly be carried away from each other as the pieces drifted apart. This is exactly how our planet Earth works. The Earth's outer crust is not one solid piece of rock, but rather a collection of giant puzzle pieces floating on a layer of incredibly hot, semi-liquid rock. Understanding this moving puzzle is the secret to understanding why certain animals live where they do today. Now that we have that picture in our minds, let us look at the scientific terms. Plate tectonics is the unifying geological theory that describes the large-scale motion of the Earth's outermost shell, which we call the lithosphere. The lithosphere is broken up into massive, rigid slabs of solid rock known as tectonic plates. These plates include both the continents we live on and the heavy ocean floor beneath the seas. But these plates do not just sit still. They actively glide over the asthenosphere, which is a hotter, more malleable layer of the Earth's mantle located just below them. It is this constant gliding motion that slowly but surely changes the face of our planet. So, what exactly is pushing these massive plates around? The movement is driven by immense convection currents deep within the Earth. Imagine a pot of boiling water. Hot material near the core rises, cools as it reaches the surface, and then sinks back down in a continuous, powerful loop. This endless cycle acts as a giant conveyor belt for the tectonic plates above. As these plates move, they interact in dramatic ways. They can crash into each other to form towering mountain ranges, pull apart to create vast new oceans, or slide past one another, triggering earthquakes. Over millions of years, this continuous engine fundamentally reshapes the surface of our world. You might still be wondering why a biology student studying the diversity of chordates needs to learn about rocks and geology. The answer is profound. Plate tectonics is the ultimate driver of zoogeography. Zoogeography is the study of how and why animals are distributed across the globe. You see, animals do not just live in a vacuum. Their habitats, their migration routes, and their physical boundaries are entirely defined by the landscape. When the Earth's surface shifts, it creates new environments, destroys old ones, and builds insurmountable barriers like oceans and mountains. Therefore, to truly understand the diversity and distribution of chordates, we must first understand the geological forces that shaped their world. This brings us to a crucial moment in our planet's history. Millions of years ago, the map of the Earth looked completely different. All the continents were joined together in a single massive supercontinent called Pangaea. During this time, early chordates and terrestrial vertebrates had the incredible ability to roam freely across land masses that are now separated by vast, impassable oceans. There were no oceanic barriers preventing a species from migrating from what is now South America all the way to Africa or Australia. However, this unified world did not last.
The relentless convection currents we discussed earlier eventually caused the tectonic plates beneath Pangaea to break apart and begin drifting away from each other.
When those tectonic plates broke apart and drifted away, they did something incredibly important for biology. They carried different populations of animals with them. By physically isolating these populations on separate, drifting continents, the animals were forced to evolve independently, adapting to their new, distinct environments. Without understanding plate tectonics, it would be completely impossible to explain some of the greatest mysteries in zoology. For instance, it explains why we find identical fossils of ancient freshwater reptiles in both South America and Africa. They were once the same landmass. It also perfectly explains why Australia, having broken off and isolated itself very early, is uniquely dominated by marsupial mammals, unlike anywhere else on Earth.
Even though plate tectonics is a geological and biological concept, we can actually measure the movement of these massive plates using basic physics. The movement is incredibly slow, much like the rate at which your fingernails grow. We use the fundamental kinematic equation for constant speed, which is v equals d divided by t. Conceptually, this tells us that speed is directly proportional to distance and inversely proportional to time. In this formula, v represents the velocity or speed of the tectonic plate, usually measured in centimeters per year. The symbol d represents the total distance the plate has moved, often converted into kilometers for global maps. Finally, t represents the total time the plate has been moving, typically measured in millions of years. If the velocity increases, the plate will cover a greater distance in the exact same amount of time.
Now that we have our formula, let us apply it to a real-world scenario. Imagine the South American and African plates are separating at a constant velocity of 2.5 centimeters per year. We want to know how far apart they will be after 100 million years. We are given the velocity and the time, and we need to find the distance. First, we rearrange our standard velocity formula by multiplying both sides by time, giving us d equals v times t. Next, we substitute our values, 2.5 for velocity and 100 million for time. Multiplying these gives us 250 million centimeters. Since centimeters are too small to visualize across an ocean, we divide by 100,000 to convert to kilometers. Our final answer is 2,500 kilometers. Physically, this means tectonic forces have created a massive 2,500-kilometer ocean, perfectly explaining the complete isolation of terrestrial chordates on these two continents.
Let us look at another crucial calculation, this time finding out when two populations were separated. Suppose paleontologists find identical flightless bird fossils on two islands currently 600 kilometers apart. The plates are drifting at 3 centimeters per year. We need to find the time they were connected. First, we must ensure our units match. We convert 600 kilometers into centimeters by multiplying by 100,000, giving us 60 million centimeters. Keeping units consistent is absolutely critical. Next, we rearrange our formula to solve for time, which gives us t equals d divided by v. We substitute our distance of 60 million centimeters and divide by our velocity of 3 centimeters per year. The final answer is 20 million years. This tells evolutionary biologists the exact moment in geological history when the bird population was split, proving that the timeline of life is written in the rocks.
To visualize everything we have discussed, let us examine this diagram of a divergent boundary. Here,
You can clearly see the South American plate on the left and the African plate on the right, with large red arrows indicating they are pulling apart. Notice the rigid gray layer, the lithosphere, which makes up the plates themselves. Beneath it lies the asthenosphere. Right in the middle, you can see bright red magma rising from deep within the Earth, pushing the plates apart and creating new ocean floor. Most importantly, look at the surface of the continents. You can see matching fossil icons on both sides of the divide. This diagram beautifully illustrates how the physical separation of the landmasses directly leads to the biological isolation of the species living upon them. As we wrap up, let us review the most important ideas we have covered today. First, plate tectonics is the grand mechanism that moves the Earth's lithosphere, acting as the ultimate stage director for the evolution of life. Second, by slowly shifting continents and creating oceans, this geological process dictates zoogeography, determining where animals can travel and where they become isolated. Third, we learned that we can actually calculate this deep geological history using simple kinematic physics, allowing us to date evolutionary divergence. You have now seen how the history of life on Earth is deeply and permanently connected to the geological history of the Earth itself. Excellent work today, and keep exploring these fascinating connections.